Good afternoon and welcome to the 24th edition of the National Science Festival. And this year, SciFest has gone online with a 6-month festival, monthly themed festival. I am Apiwe Magwala, your facilitator for the webinar today. This month, we take a focus on agriculture in accordance with our theme for this year, which is Take Root, Nurture. In celebration of the this theme is in celebration with the International Year of Plant Health as declared by the United Nations. For today's webinar, we are partnered with the KwaZulu-Natal Museum, and our webinar will be hosted by Marsha Khalik, the Chief Education Officer for Outreach at the KZN Museum. Marsha holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Rhodes University with majors in environmental science and geography, as well as a Bachelor of Science honors degree in environmental management from the University of South Africa. Her passion lies in science engagement, promoting science communication, uplifting learner and community-based education. Today, Marsha will be hosting a webinar on mint infusions. Please do feel free to use our Q&A section. And if you're watching from Facebook, post all your questions on the comment section. I'll hand over to you, Marsha.
Okay, good afternoon to SciFest and the online viewers. And thank you to the KZN Museum and SciFest for allowing us to participate in these webinars where we get to share our interest, our knowledge, as well as network with others to promote science engagement. Mint is the overarching term for the genus Mentha, which is commonly grown in most of our gardens, if not many. It's widespread in many countries and is easily available in our supermarkets. Mint is such a delightful herb that is not only refreshing and invigorating in flavor, but is versatile and valued for its medicinal, cosmetic, and culinary purposes. Mentha, the Latin term for mint, includes a variety of mint species such as spearmint, which is commonly known as our garden mint, lamb or mackerel mint. This mint is flavored or highly favored in our savory or sweet dishes, teas, toothpaste, and bubble gums. And then we have some apple mint also known as pineapple mint. It's known for its very sweet, fruity taste, highly favored in teas. And peppermint, that's known for its pungent menthol aftertaste, and that's favored for its medicinal use. All right, so mint is a herbaceous plant that originates from Europe, Asia, as well as other countries. But in South Africa, we do have 2 indigenous mint. These are known as Mentha longifolia, known for its long leaves with those very white to mauve flowers, commonly known as wild mint or horse mint or wild spearmint. And then we have our Mentha aquatica. Aquatica pretty gives it away. It's sort of mint that loves water, so it's characterized by those pink mauve flowers, commonly known as wild mint. And they easily grow along streams and marshes, and the wild mint is awesome at attracting bees and butterflies when those flowers are in bloom. A lot of the time, both of these species are favored in your teas, which is then used to treat coughs or cramps or respiratory illnesses, and they are used interchangeably as culinary herbs. So mint generally grows in our temperate climates, and it prefers more water and sunlight with the pH of 6 to 7. So basically, it's more acidic going to neutral. And to ensure that your soil is moist, you probably want to add a bit of mulch because your mint loves getting its feet wet. So medicinally, mint is known to relax aching muscles, soothe indigestion. That's more or less reducing your abdominal pain, treating irritable bowel syndrome, reducing gas and bloating by relaxing that digestive system. Cosmetically, it's used in shampoos, creams, toothpaste, because it gives you that very cool, fresh feeling afterwards. And it's also used to flavor an array of dishes, both sweet and savory. The very strong aroma from the mint makes it this perfect garden plant. Firstly, because it attracts lots of mutually beneficial insects, but it also repels your pests, such as your fleas and your mosquitoes, mice, aphids, those things that you don't really want. And mint does make a great companion for peas, tomatoes, peppers, broccoli, cabbages, cauliflower, lettuce, and squash, just to name a few. But it also improves the health of your vegetables and the flavor of it. So it's very useful to have in the garden. Other herbs like your oregano and some plants like marigolds enjoy the company of mint because they attract mutually beneficial pollinators. However, it is important to note that your mint can become very quickly invasive. It's known to take over your garden beds rather quickly. They rapidly outcompete with the other plants for resources, such as your sunlight and your water and space. And it also doesn't thrive very well with plants that prefer drier conditions, or drier climates. So herbs like sage and thyme that don't really enjoy a lot of water, you'd find that your mint doesn't grow very well with them. They're not very good companions to them. So my suggestion would be that if you want to plant mint in a garden, because it's so invasive, probably plant them in pots that stand on the ground so that they can still serve that purpose of giving that aroma to the surrounding vegetables so that you can ward off those pests that you don't want, and you can also attract the mutually beneficial pests. However, you could also, yes?
Sorry, Marsha.
Yes.
We can't really see you clearly. Are your lights still on? It's a bit dark.
Yeah, everything is on. It's exactly the way it was. Let me try moving the laptop.
I think
The
that
lighting is a
might
bit...
be a bit better. That it is quite darker than it was.
Is it? Okay, let me see, because I didn't change anything. It was as we were.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Let's see.
Could you perhaps use your torch on your phone just to shine it on your face, because we're...
Okay, all right, let's try that. Sure. Just get my phone on. Okay.
And perhaps just rest it on your computer screen just to provide some lighting.
Yeah, or maybe I should stop the video here, the camera, and maybe maybe do it on my phone. Would that work? It would be a bit brighter. Okay, let me try the lighting.
I think that could work.
Oh, it's gone darker.
Yes.
No, that's gone very dark.
Way dark.
All right, let's try. Okay, hang on 1 minute. Let me just try the other option. All right, so where we were was looking at our gardens. So basically we were saying that it's really quite nice to have mint growing in your garden because it's known to attract those mutually beneficial insects that you'd want for pollination. And it repels those pests that you don't want. So those pests would be your fleas and your mosquitoes, your mice, some of the aphids, and it's obviously a great companion for certain vegetables, like your peas and tomatoes and peppers and broccoli, cabbages, cauliflower, and your lettuce and squash, because it doesn't just improve the overall health of those vegetables, but it actually increases the flavor of those vegetables. So mint is an excellent way to grow certain vegetables in the garden. And then we've got your oregano and your marigolds that also enjoy the company of mint because they attract pollinators. But it's important to note, like I said earlier, that mint can become invasive. It tends to take over your garden beds very quickly. They outcompete other plants for resources, so your sunshine, your water, space. And so that's why it's suggested that when you're planting mint in a garden, preferably put it into a pot and place it on top of the soil so that it still serves the purpose of attracting those pollinators that you want and repelling the pests that you don't. But at the same time, you're not allowing it to invade and take over the rest of the space in the garden. The other option is that you can sink in some of those pots. So if you sink in some of the pots, you could then make sure that your mint is sort of growing nice and evenly with all the other vegetables without having them move around in the pots. So sunken pots work quite well. So mint is also very easily propagated. Literally, you could take a tip cutting of your mint, remove the bottom bits of the leaves, and then pop that stem into a glass of water over a few days to maybe just over a week, and it will start to develop new roots. And then that mint stem with the new roots, the new plant can be replanted or transplanted into compost and watered. Remember that mint loves water. They like their feet wet. So you want to put in enough water so that your mint can start to grow. And as it starts to grow, you can then add a bit of fertilizer every few weeks so that your mint takes root nicely. The thing about it is that even if your mint has a lot of water, provided it's in well-drained soils, it will continue to grow that much well. And if it has enough sunlight, it would do equally well. You'd want to avoid full shade. Shade is a little bit of a problem because mint is prone to fungal infections. So try and avoid your shade at all costs if possible. And then if we look at the different types of mint, so we said we've got apple mint, and we've got peppermint, we've got spearmint. There's a lot of varieties of mint. So if we look at mint, there's literally over 600 varieties of mint. And each has its own flavor. And ideally, when you pick the mint that you want, you'd sort of need to know what kind of flavor you'd want, so you'd know what to use. Because if you use apple mint, you'd have that very fruity flavor. And if you use spearmint, you'd have a very light flavor. And your peppermint, a more pungent menthol taste. So very much depending on what sort of taste you'd want or flavor you'd want, you'd then pick that mint in accordance. If you're looking at a very strong menthol aftertaste, it's very indicative of your peppermint, which is favored in teas and medicinal purposes. So in other words, if you've got a sore throat, if you need an ointment or mouthwash or massage gels or anything that targets a runny nose or sinuses or stress, you probably want to use peppermint because of the very strong menthol taste and smell. Your peppermint is excellent because it's also used to ease digestive upsets, like I said, the gas and the bloating, relieves tension headaches, migraines, freshens your breath, improves your energy, reduces your fatigue, and is also known to relieve cramps and improve your sleep. So peppermint is excellent. The more sweet, delicate flavor is likely to be your spearmint. Spearmint is favored more in your savory dishes or your candies, so, and maybe some cosmetics. So if we're thinking of shaving creams, toothpaste, bubble gums, you're probably eating spearmint and not peppermint. However, I think we just need to keep in mind that, like I said, mint is that overarching term for mentha. So all these mints and these variety of mints can be used interchangeably in cooking and baking and cosmetics. It's just your preference for it. So both your spearmint and your peppermint, and the reason I'm mentioning these two is because they're widespread and very easily accessible. They both have menthol, but your peppermint has a much higher content of menthol. So for instance, your peppermint has 40% more menthol, whereas your spearmint has less than 1% menthol. Therefore, your peppermint gives off this intense explosion of a mint flavor. It's extremely pungent. Peppermint is also a mix of two varieties of mint. So in other words, it's a hybrid of spearmint and watermint. And so therefore that makes it more potent in flavor. All right, so Mint is obviously, like I said, one of those herbs that are used in medicines, in cosmetics, in cooking. And one of those wonderful oils that we get out of it is essential oils. And obviously, when you purchase essential oils at the supermarkets, they're pretty costly. And so one way of getting your essential oil is to use the homemade approach to making it. So there's one way of making homemade oil, and that's through the process of infusion. And infusion is literally extracting those chemical compounds from your plant in a solvent. And that solvent can be water, it could be alcohol, it could be oil. So literally, in the case of making mint oil, you would take your mint material. In other words, you'd separate your mint leaves from your stems. You'd wash them nicely, dry them, and then you would bruise them. So in other words, you would literally take a stone and just crush them a little, or your hand and just tear them a bit so that they're lightly bruised. And then you'd pop them into a nice container, a nice glass clean container with a nice sealable lid. And then you would add what we call a carrier oil to the mint leaves or the mint material. And you would allow those mint leaves to soak. In other words, to stay suspended in that oil. And the term that we use for it is steep. So in other words, you would allow it to steep in the solvent for approximately 24 to 72 hours. And in doing so, you're allowing that mint oil to then be infused into the carrier oil. And after those 24 to 72 hours, you then can use some, I used muslin, but you can use some cheesecloth, and you literally strain away the material from the oil and you store it in another bottle. So I've got some oil here. I've literally infused, I don't know if you can see that, but I've literally infused my mint into sweet almond oil. And this is sweet almond oil because it's much thinner, it's also lighter in color, right? It's lightweight, and I've also infused my mint into olive oil. It's a lot thicker, it's a heavier oil, right? And we'll get into the reasons why I've used that particular oil. But the idea is that when you are sealing your oil at the end of it, you want to make sure that you don't get a lot of air into that oil, right? Because firstly, you want the oil to maintain its properties. So you want to make sure that it's correctly sealed. And secondly, you want to prevent any oil from being evaporated. So you want to make sure that it's sealed correctly and that it's stored in a cool area, away from sunlight. And in doing so, you sort of extending its shelf life. So when we're looking at carrier oils, like I told you, I've used sweet almond oil and olive oil. I've used a carrier oil. Now, basically, carrier oils are oils that are derived from seeds or kernels or nuts. And the purpose of a carrier oil is that it dilutes your essential oil. So the mint oil that we extracted from the mint leaves, that would be your essential oil. But then we infused it into a carrier oil. The carrier oil, in this case, I used two, was the almond oil and the olive oil. But there are lots of other carrier oils. We'll go into a few just now. So your carrier oil is quite important because you want to dilute that essential oil. You can't apply essential oil directly onto your skin. It tends to cause irritation. So ideally, you want to dilute it in a carrier oil. And at the same time, the carrier oil will help to transfer that essential oil onto the skin quite safely. So a few of the carrier oils that you have as choices, you could use grapeseed oil if you wanted. Grapeseed oil is very lightweight. It contains lots of vitamin E. It's easily absorbed into the skin. So it's a wonderful oil to use. Excellent when it comes to tightening and toning your skin, and also protects against sun damage. Now, if you think about mint, mint has menthol, and menthol has that cooling effect. So if you had to infuse mint into an oil like grapeseed oil, which protects against sun damage, it would be excellent in cooling your skin. So it would work really well in grapeseed oil. You could also use coconut oil. It's a very hydrating, nourishing oil. There's also jojoba oil. Jojoba is very well known for hair growth. It's actually a liquid wax, despite it being called an oil, funny enough. Or in the case that I have chosen, you can use olive oil. And the reason I chose olive oil is because it's easily accessible. It's also inexpensive, and it's got a lot of fatty acids. So it's really nice to moisturize the skin. It becomes a nice massage oil. It's heavy. It's a very heavy oil. It's nice and thick, but it's got lots of vitamins and minerals in it. So when you infuse your mint into the olive oil, you can then use it as a great massage oil to relieve your tense muscles or headaches. You could also infuse it into virgin oil, into your virgin olive oil, and then you can use it to cook so that you have something that's mint flavored. The other oil that I used was sweet almond oil, a nice light colored oil, very lightweight. You'll see it's very close to water, the consistency. It's an edible oil. It's got a very pungent, nutty aroma. And it's great as a carrier oil for the skin. So that is why I chose it, because it's very easily absorbed, quickly absorbed into the skin. It works wonderfully for your face, for moisturizing your skin. The only thing you'd have to worry about if you chose sweet almond oil is if you had nut allergies. The thing with almond oil is that it's manufactured in factories that produce peanut oil. So that could be the problem if you have nut allergies. However, if you add mint, like what I did, infuse your mint into your almond oil, you could then, it could be easily absorbed into your skin, providing a very cool, fresh effect. It could also hydrate your skin very quickly while rejuvenating it. And then you could also use the mint infused into the almond oil as a salad dressing. So you've got lots of options. And the thing with choosing a carrier oil, before you choose your carrier oil, work out what is the purpose. What is the intended purpose of the oil? And once you know what you want to use that oil for, then you can pick out the correct carrier oil. And then you can infuse your herbs into that oil so that it meets your purpose. If you had to purchase essential oils from the shop, that's a little bit different because it's pure. And that is not, it's not produced through the process of infusion, but more so through the process of extraction, which is distillation. So that's a little different. And there you'd also want to dilute that oil down. So you'd want to preferably dilute it in a carrier oil. And what I usually do is I say, well, if I've got 1 teaspoon of carrier oil, 1 drop to the 1 teaspoon would be 1%, and then 2 drops to the teaspoon would be 2%, and so forth. So your oils can work really, really well. Other uses for your oils. So it's wonderful to have these oils made. I mean, now I could use these oils for a lot of things. I could use it in my diffuser for aromatherapy, for relief from asthma symptoms. I could use it as a DIY vapor rub to massage my muscles, to clear some sinuses. You could also add a few of those oil droplets into some water, steam, and inhale it so that it clears your sinuses, loosens the phlegm. You can massage your temples to relieve the headaches. Once you infuse your oils, you could also use it to ease some discomfort from sunburn. Remember I said it works very well with the grapeseed oil in that case, or you could just add it to your shampoo to promote your hair growth. In addition to that, it could be used as a household cleaner. I know this sounds rather strange, but you could literally diffuse some of your peppermint oil or your mint oil with water. Your ratio is preferably 1:1. And you could then spray that around the house as an insect repellent, or even in your garden as an insect repellent. Other uses, there is a naturally occurring chemical compound called carvone. Now, carvone is found in spearmint, and it is known to inhibit muscle contractions in the digestive tract. So in other words, if you had to have spearmint oil, it would relieve indigestion and its associated symptoms. And you'd find it a lot in your toothpaste because it's known to fight bacterial infections. So it doesn't just freshen your breath, but it also kills that odor-causing bacteria in the mouth. A nice cup of spearmint tea, very simple to make. Just tear off a few slips of spearmint leaves, pop it into a cup of boiling water, let it steep for a few minutes, and then drain out your material, so the leftover spearmint. That's known to reduce stress and promote relaxation. The menthol has a sedative effect on the body. So that's actually very interesting. I tried it last night and it worked amazingly well. Put me right off to sleep. Among many other benefits, your spearmint is also known to alleviate joint discomfort from arthritis. So mint is obviously one of those very versatile herbs. Not much attention is given to it, but we could use it for lots of things, from your medicines right down to your cosmetics, right down to the kitchen. And you can use it to make these infused oils. So literally, you're extracting those oils and infusing them into a carrier oil. So like I said, that modern day, if you walked into a shop and you purchased these essential oils over the counter from your Clicks or Dischem or wherever, you'd literally be purchasing oil that has gone through steam distillation. In other words, they've taken harvested plant material, so your mint material, that was dried. It's then placed into an apparatus that's known as a still. That still, with some water, then heats the liquid mixture to a boil. And then once it cools, it condenses the vapor. And that is then collected in a vessel, which is then stored as your essential oils. So it's very different to your homemade oils. All right, and then I made some non-alcoholic mint extract. Now the thing about this is that it's still soaking. It needs about 3 to 4 weeks to soak, but you can see it's in a nice sealed jar. So what I've done there is I've literally taken a whole lot of mint leaves, and then I've washed them and dried them and bruised them, and I've added it to a bottle, a nice sealable bottle, and I've topped it up with apple cider vinegar. And then you literally seal that bottle and store it away for about 2 to 3 weeks in a nice dark place, in a nice cool place. And when it's ready, all I'm going to do is I'm literally going to open this and using my muslin or some cheesecloth, strain out the plant material, which you can discard, and then store away the extract. Now, the extract can be used in your desserts, in your drinks, in your candy as a flavoring agent. And instead of using the apple cider vinegar, if you still want the non-alcoholic mint extract, you can substitute the apple cider vinegar with 3 parts of glycerine to 1 part of water. Alternatively, if you want the alcoholic mint extract, which you can keep for much longer, then you would substitute your glycerine and your water or your apple cider vinegar with vodka. And obviously that would be great for a mojito if you want to make a mojito. And then you'd store it up and you'd seal it and leave it away for about 3 to 4 weeks and then strain it out again. So mint, like I said, is extremely versatile. It's an aromatic herb that's got lots of uses. And so before I end, I thought I'd just leave you with a few ideas for using mint in the kitchen. So if you want to go savory, you could go with some marinated lamb with the mint sauce dressing. Maybe try some paprika chicken with your mint and cherry tomatoes, or a light-hearted pea and mint soup. If you wanted to finish it up with a nice dessert, you could go with the mint cake or mint chocolate and lime, layered mint candies. I mean, my favorite is the Peppermint Delight. And for those during a really hot summer, you could try making a fresh mojito or fresh mint and ginger garlic lemonade. So there's lots of ways in which you can use mint. Something that grows so quickly, invades really quickly, but it has a lot of purposes. You could use it for a wide range of things.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Marsha, for such an
Sure.
informative session. Once again, I would like to just remind you to post your questions in our Q&A section, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can post your questions on the comment section. We do have some questions. Spearmint and peppermint are often used interchangeably, and many may not be really sure what exactly is the difference between the two, because I think most people would often think that it is the same thing. It is all just one plant and one plant species. Could you explain what the difference is between spearmint and peppermint?
Sure. It's the flavor. So ideally, it is the flavor. Literally, your peppermint is more menthol and your spearmint is less menthol. So your peppermint has, like I said, 40% more menthol. So it gives you that explosive, pungent menthol aftertaste, whereas your spearmint has less than 1% menthol. So it's not as explosive or pungent. At the same time, your peppermint is a hybrid of the watermint and the spearmint. So because it's a mix of two mints, it's extremely explosive. And your peppermint, because it's so strong and has that more pungent taste, you'd prefer using it, or most people prefer using it in medications, or maybe it's highly favored in teas, whereas your spearmint has got that very light, sweet flavor. And so it's more preferred in your candies and your cooking and your bubble gums and things like that.
Okay, and that is really, truly helpful. And in terms of infusions and extracts, I think that's also something that we commonly don't really understand or know the difference between. We often see in supermarkets and in pharmacies mint extracts. So could you just explain again the difference, and how do you know the difference between an infusion and an extract?
All right. My understanding of an infusion is basically a liquid that has other ingredients that has been steeped into it. So in other words, other ingredients that have been soaked into it. So your tea, your mint oils, all of those things are mint infusions, because you're literally infusing one ingredient into the liquid. So into that solvent, which, like I said, is your oil, your water, or your alcohol. Whereas an extract is more so the process of distillation. So where they're making that pure essential oil, where they're using the still to literally steam, boil, reach a heating point, and thereafter whatever is cooled condenses and is extracted out. It's not being infused into something else. It's literally being drawn out of the plant.
Thank you. And once you have actually gone ahead and made your mint infusion at home, where would be the best place to store it? How long can you store it as well?
All right. For the oils, I would preferably store it in a darker bottle, because that would limit the sunshine that gets in. You'd want to keep it in cool, dry place somewhere out of sunlight. You could keep it in the fridge. The fridge would ensure that the conditions stay the same. So in other words, the properties are maintained, and that the oil is not exposed to a lot of air. And so obviously it would also maintain its shelf life. So ideally, I would keep it in any place that's out of sunlight. You'd go fridge, you'd go a nice bookshelf maybe, or in a cupboard in the kitchen, a nice dark area. And I would preferably say a year is safe. You would sort of know if there was something wrong with your oil, because it would start to change in smell and in composition. So I'd say, to be safe, go for a year. You could keep it up to a year if it's stored correctly.
That is truly quite a long time. And just in terms of buying at the supermarket, it can be quite overwhelming when you're looking for mint and let's say you want to try and make your own mint infusion. What type of mint should one try and purchase if they are purchasing from a supermarket or a farmer's market?
Well, that's a very clever question because when you walk into the supermarket, they don't tell you peppermint or spearmint or apple mint or watermint. They just say mint. Literally, I went into like Spar the other day to get mint and it just said mint. And I'm like, what mint am I looking at? So I think the best way to know what mint you're looking at is to go with taste or to go with smell. So literally, chew a little bit of mint and you'd know if it's a light sweet flavor, you're probably eating spearmint. If it's a more pungent menthol aftertaste, you're probably eating peppermint. The other option is you could just crush a few leaves and you'd recognize it by its fragrance. So that's what I did. I literally tore a piece of the leaf and smelt it, and I knew that light smell was spearmint. And like I said, if you want to infuse your oils, it's depending on what you want to do with that oil. So if I want to cook with the oil, I probably want to use the sweet almond oil, like I said, or I might want to use the olive oil, more likely. Then I would probably go with spearmint because spearmint is more favored in your culinary, in your kitchen. It's used for your savory dishes. If I wanted to ease my muscles and relax them, and I wanted that very strong menthol effect, that cooling effect, or if I had some sunburn and I wanted to alleviate that, then I'd probably use something with a little bit more menthol. So I'd probably look for peppermint because that's got the 40% more menthol. And then I'd probably try and infuse it, like I said, into grapeseed oil because remember, grapeseed oil is really good for your sunburns and things like that. So it all depends on what you want to use that oil for. It would then determine what type of carrier oil you would need to get and what type of mint you would want to get. But ideally, if you walked into a supermarket, like I said, I had this issue. I walked in there and they didn't know what mint it was. You're probably going to find spearmint or peppermint in your supermarkets. The reason I say this is because they're more widely available and easily accessible. So that's probably what you're going to find.
Thank you. And I know a lot of us may be living in small apartments and may not necessarily have gardening space. And in terms of growing your own mint at home, would you say it does well growing in a pot? And how would you take care of it if you are growing a small pot of mint? And where could you possibly place it within your living space to ensure that it grows optimally?
All right. Well, firstly, we have to look at the requirements of mint, right? So the requirements for mint to grow well is sunlight, not a lot of shade. You can have semi-shade, but not a lot of shade because remember, shade promotes that fungus, and we don't want that. You want water because mint likes to get their feet wet, and you will need a pot. So yes, you could definitely plant it indoors. There are lots of people, I've read lots of articles of people who actually plant mint as an ornamental plant indoors. So ideally you'd want to plant it in maybe a pot that is wider and longer and shallower as opposed to deeper, because because mint is regarded as a runner plant because you've got these horizontal roots that run. So ideally you want to put a little bit of compost in there, and then you could plant in your stems because remember you could grow them from cuttings, and then literally place them in some sunshine and water them maybe daily if you'd wanted to. One way to regulate that water is you could probably put on some mulch. Now, sawdust serves as a great mulch because it's known to retain moisture. So you could put on some sawdust if you wanted to, leave it in an area where it gets a little bit of sun so that it can grow and do really well. You'd be able to harvest that mint for your cooking in your kitchen and whatever you need to. It'll also give a great aroma. So it's a wonderful plant to have. At the same time, you'd want to make sure that it receives ample water. So if it did receive too much of water, provided it had good drainage, you wouldn't have an issue. You'd still have great mint. The thing about mint is that it does die back in winter. So although it's a perennial plant, you may have less of that foliage, and then you'll be able to harvest again in your summer, in your late spring, early summer.
Thank you, Marsha. And once again, I'd just like to remind our viewers that we're still open for taking questions in the Q&A section, and on Facebook, you can post your questions on the comment section. And in terms of getting your mint to plant, would it be better, or if you're going to start off with a pot plant, would it be better to buy seeds or buy your miniature pot from a nursery? Will the growing time be the same for these plants? And are there any specifications of how you can actually start growing your plant if you're growing it from seeds?
Well, you can grow your mint from seed, but it's advisable to grow it just as well from a vegetative cutting, because it does equally well from a vegetative cutting. So you could grow equally well from a vegetative cutting. There's no issue with that. The thing is, as long as you give it, like I said, that well-drained soils, some sunshine and some water, you wouldn't have an issue with actually growing your mint. There's no need to go out and get a bigger pot. You could literally, as it grows, transplant it into a bigger pot if you needed to.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you once again for such an informative session today. I'm sure a lot of us have learned a lot of things that we did not know about mint, and it is a really, really versatile plant, a very useful plant at that. And I think it would be encouraged to have it in your house as it has so many uses. We'd just like to thank you for hosting our webinar today. And if we don't have any other questions, thank you for this informative session that you provided for us.
Sure. Can I just mention one thing about mint before we go?
Yes, definitely.
All the mint is wonderful to have, and most of it is edible. There is one particular variety. It's called pennyroyal. It falls under the Mentha pelagium, which is still part of the Mentha genus. And it's commonly known as spearmint or mosquito plant, because remember, mint generally chases or repels your mosquitoes. But the problem with this mint is that it is toxic. The oil of it is toxic. Even in small amounts, if it is ingested by mouth, it can be toxic. It can cause seizures and comas, and even multi-organ failure, as well as death. So there is that one particular variety of mint that you don't want to eat, just to keep that in view.
Thank you, Marsha.
My pleasure.
We do have one question from Samantha, and she just says, hi, Marsha, thanks for your talk. You mentioned that it could be used if you suffer from joint pains, arthritis. Was it spearmint or peppermint that would be best suited for that?
I would go with peppermint. I would go with peppermint because of the strong menthol in it. And that will give you a little bit more relief, I would think.
Thank you, Marsha.
My pleasure.
So thank you. And yes, I think those are all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for the session. And once again, I'd just like to remind you that SciFest online is still going on. Our virtual festival is still continuing right up until March 2021. We actually still have a jam-packed schedule for the 2 weeks of this month until we get into the Christmas days, we will be having events, we'll be having science shows, panel discussions on viruses and vaccines, small scale farming in South Africa, innovation and technology in agriculture, as well as panel discussions on women in farming and the development of commercial cannabis farming. So if you do want more information on those events, please do go onto our website and register to be a part of those events and to participate in those events. Thank you for joining us today. Do log on to our website for more events and the days and the times for those events. Thank you very much.